sometimes, even as we're talking, even if we aren't doing the exact EMDR protocol, I'll have them just hold on to the tappers or use them. I'll practice doing it. Just kidding.
Try it. Maybe break the heat.
I was probably in high school, teenager, and my aunt was in a master's in social work program at the University of Delaware, and she was working and living in Baltimore. And she would tell me about some of her patients and experiences with clients. And I was just fascinated that she got to sit with people and hear their stories. And I remember like one particular thing she told me that she tried with a family. She was like, well, imagine you were a fly on the wall and you were living in, or you were buzzing around your house. What would you see and what you would do? And I was like, oh, what? I mean, in my mind at that time, I probably wouldn't have used the word perspective. But now what I think about it is what an interesting way to change perspective. And that I just liked being able to think like that. So that was the first time I thought about it. But then when I went to college, I didn't really think about it again. And I changed my major about 7 times. I really thought I was going to do math, but then I didn't think I was such a good teacher, at least not of math for little kids. And so I thought I went to films. I studied film for a while. I tried being an artist. I spent a whole semester observing primates, thinking I had a Jane Goodall identity somewhere, channeling in me, and tried in archaeology, anthropology, and finally, after 2 years in college, landed myself in the social work program, and it felt like a good fit, and I ended up doing my bachelor's in social work, and then working, and then doing my master's. So that's kind of a long roundabout way of getting there, but it worked for me. So the first job I had was right out of undergrad. I worked, and it had a huge impact on my career, and I worked at a place called Three Springs Paint Rock Valley. It's right outside of Huntsville, Alabama. And Three Springs was a residential program for teenagers who were struggling with issues of being beyond control, substance abuse. About 20% of them came from being in state's custody or foster care, had been in foster care, and then about 80% of them were private. Arrangements with parents or family members. So we had helicopters bringing in kids of rock stars and these other kids who had none of that experience in their life. It was a really interesting group. And so I was 22, 23, and I was in charge of 12 kids in the woods 24/7. So it was 6 days on, 2 days off. And we lived together in a cabin. We built our own privy, and we cooked all our own food. And we hiked up and down this hill to where they could go to school and doing that kind of stuff. And they taught me a whole lot about how to get along with people, all kinds of different people. I probably was wildly underprepared just having had a bachelor's in social work at that point. But yeah, I learned a lot from them and about myself, which I think is so important as a social worker, and still part of my learning about is figuring out how you work and what's going on with you. So yeah, that was my first job. And then my mentor from Chattanooga called me up and just as I was applying for the Peace Corps and said, why don't you go to grad school instead? I'll make sure you have a assistantship and set you up at South Carolina. And so I hadn't gotten the response from the Peace Corps yet, and I had some medical issues outstanding that I was waiting for. So I was like, well, I could go to grad school first and do that, and it was a free ride and it made sense. So I ended up in South Carolina and did my master's degree, and then I ended up working. I had done my internship with a project for pregnant and parenting teens, and so then that project took me to Clemson after I graduated, and I did research, and that's what I really thought I was going to do with social work at that point, was research. I didn't do the clinical track. I didn't think I'd ever do clinical work. At that point, I was just crunching numbers and interviewing people and entering data and coming up with questions and helping write grants, and I loved it. And so I worked at Clemson for a while, and then the grants ended, and George Bush got elected. And so I could have pieced together other grants, but I decided I knew some people in Kentucky and moved here and got a job. And my first clinical job then was for the Family Preservation Program with Bluegrass and ComCare. And so I was in people's homes doing family preservation for about a year and a half. And then I really learned a lot from them too. I mean, and people who were at risk for, their kids were at risk for removal, trying to help them either get reunified or stay together, work on some skills, and trying to, a lot of times, like we know about all people who are in crisis, their basic needs weren't getting met, and so that was a big part of sometimes why they were in crisis. So a lot of case management as well as therapy. They're starting a new therapy. And at that time, I started working part-time at the Florence Crittenden home on the weekends, and I got to know the girls there and the staff, and the director asked me to start doing assessments because she thought I had good clinical skills. I still hadn't really worked on my clinical skills at that point, aside from what I had done in school. And so I started filling in and doing assessments when they needed it, and when the therapist position was open, I thought that was really for me. And so I say at this point, that's where I spent the bulk of my career. I was at the Florence Crittenden home for 12 years. After I did the brief youth care worker position on the weekends, which was overnight and that sort of thing, which I still filled in sometimes before I had my own kids. I was the therapist and the program director there for all that time. And I really loved that job. I would say I liked the balance and diversity of that job. So I had some administrative responsibilities, some supervisory things. I got to supervise the youth care workers and the case management and stuff, and work with a team on helping the residents and their families and their babies. And then I got to do one-on-one therapy and group therapy, and really redo the program, which was really exciting for me. And so we had a lot of different successes, and I still see some of those kids who come back now to see me. So I did that for, the bulk of my career. Like if I think about all the jobs I have, which haven't been that many, but that was the big one. But in 2013, some things in the climate changed there, and someone from the UK psychiatry department approached me and said, well, what about this? You know, maybe you're ready for a change. And so it seemed like a change might be a good idea. And so I interviewed, and I've been here at University of Kentucky for 3.5 years now, doing outpatient practice. I see mostly adults, also adolescents. I do family functional therapy with adolescents and their families, and so drawing on some of my clinical skills that I really developed with the help of the Florence Crittenden home and the residents there, and my supervisors and the trainings that I've done. I was able to learn family functional therapy and use that in my work with adolescents here. And then I spend the rest of my practice with adolescents, either in individual therapy or adults, and some family work. And since, like we were talking about earlier about the EMDR, I mean, that's probably a huge part of my practice right now, is working with people who have been impacted by trauma, and using EMDR as one of those tools. I've also recently become interested in internal family systems as a way of approaching and looking at how people organize themselves and can work through issues and problems in their lives. And so I love where I'm at right now, because I have so many opportunities for training. I work with people who are really motivated, and some amazing colleagues that I get to meet with and talk to every day. liked being able to do clinical social work because you see the impact that you can have in people's lives and the relationship and how it grows and changes, and you learn about yourself too. Like I mentioned before, I've learned a lot about myself in this job. And so what I like is being in relationship with people, being able to witness to their stories in life and to be able to hear what they have to say. Sometimes people ask me, why do you do this? I mean, you work with people with trauma all day long, all the time. Don't you get sick of hearing all that horrible things that happen in the world? And for me, and this is what I normally say to people when they ask me that, is that I really feel like the reason that there needs to be a witness to that. And even if I wasn't hearing it all day long every day, I know it's going on in the world. And to me, that seems like my part, is to be able to witness their stories and share that, and that's a small way of adding to the healing that can happen in the world. So that's a lot of why I do it. The other reason, in the big picture, is it's so flexible. I mean, when as I was changing around careers or trying to think about it in college, I thought, and I talked to my aunt and I talked to other people, and just exploring what it was I wanted to do. And obviously I have been able to change jobs and situations. Social work is pretty flexible like that. There's so many different settings you can go into. There's so many different opportunities. I kind of feel like I have some friends who want a mid-shift, career change, midlife career change or something. And I feel like, if I need that, I can still be in social work and do that. And not have to go back to school completely. So that's been kind of nice, is to kind of, for me, being able to keep my options open and know that it helps me ward off any sense of burnout, is that I know there's lots of things I can do with this field, and that's kind of cool, even within clinical social work too. So those are the things I like about it. Probably the paperwork, does everybody say the paperwork is what they hate about it? I don't like that. But I don't mind writing assessments. I enjoy getting into it. I think the hard part for me is just all the other stuff, right? The charting I have to do and stuff like that. And sometimes, yeah. And sometimes I feel like another part, and I dealt with this a lot more when I was working in the community at large and rather than this outpatient clinic, was stereotypes about social workers. What has been a hard thing for me. I will sometimes meet patients who have ideas about what I'm going to do or how I'm going to be with them that aren't at all true to my intentions or even my role. And so sometimes that, I think, is a barrier about the culture's view of what social workers do. For me, I try to go into it knowing that is part of it, and that one of the ways that helps is that I have, and I started this a lot at the Florence Critton home, but I always try to make sure that I am part of a team caring for people. And so that, here, I have the opportunity to work with psychiatrists and with other doctors if they're being cared for in other parts of the healthcare system. And I try to reach out to all of those people and make sure that I'm not the only one that is knowing what's going on with this person, because taking a team approach will really help diffuse some of that risk and help make sure that patient is going to be well taken care of by the system as a whole. So that's one way, is I try to make sure I'm part of a team, and I know I'm part of a team, and that's important. The other thing is just to try to take it seriously. And that part of you that just doesn't want to look at it, that thinks, is this, to pay attention to my gut instinct if I think a kid's being abused or if I think something doesn't feel right, to pay attention to it and ask directly. Because what I know is that that's going to stick with me and that if I can just directly try to address it, I'll be able to sleep at night. Starting when I was in grad school, I joined a student organization and got involved that way. That's always been important to me. I think we're all part of a community, there's no reason for us to do this all by ourselves. So having support is good, my family, but also professionals. So in grad school, I was part of the student organization, and we did a lot of service activities, and we did a lot of things. And now I'm part of the clinical society, KSCSW, and I've been doing that for over 10 years, and that's been a great source of both professional growth and development and networking for me. So I would encourage people to do that. Personally, I also do try to exercise. I love yoga. That's, any place, anytime I can do a yoga class, or just 5-10 minutes in the morning or before or after work. I think that's really important. I also really try to, I had a supervisor tell me once, you walk through the door of your office and you enter a different place and space in your mind and in your body than when you're home. And so I try to do the best I can here, and there's some overlap, of course, but then when I get home, then I'm home and I can be and enjoy my kids and life. And switching to this job, I'm not on call anymore, and I used to be on call a lot, so that makes that transition a lot easier for me mentally. It helps me take care of myself even more. Yeah. And I also like just being outside. I would say being in nature and being able to go hiking and camping and water sports and things like that helps me restore any weekend or any time. I had a really great mentor in undergrad and followed him to graduate school. He's the one that kind of got me connected. Having that mentoring relationship was really important in my life. And I think if you can reach out to someone who has similar interests or even different interests, but you can connect with and can be in a sort of mentoring role, that was really helpful for me. I learned a lot from him and about social work and just about how to do this profession. I also think, when I think back to my time in graduate school, having some balance. I took up mountain biking for the first time when I was in grad school, and it was something I hadn't done before, but it was really a good way to get outside and not think about work or school at all. Just get muddy. And so, yeah, having some balance, doing something fun that's truly just for fun and for you was a really good thing for me. And then also developing friends, some of which I'm still in touch with, and having study groups, being able to work and plan your time out so that you are able to find some balance and do some of that self-care. There's so many things. My other advice that I thought of just after I asked that question was try anything. I just think that's the really cool thing for me about being a social worker, is that there are so many different ways that you can practice, and that if you have an idea or you have just an inkling, just go with that and see where it takes you. Not every time will it work out, of course, but that's how things go. And even if it works for a time, then you've learned something about yourself and others and given people opportunities. And I think that sort of change is part of why we're doing this, is to try and make that change in the world, so we can model that to our patients by being open, or clients, or whoever you're working with, being open to those opportunities ourselves and showing them both on a micro level and a macro level how you can do that and that you're willing to take those risks. And so, yeah, I would say, that the things I have worked in my career, when I pay attention to my gut feelings and when I keep trying different things. People laugh what, you didn't even go to the clinical track or change your major 7 times when I talk to students? I'm like, well, yeah, I just try a lot of different things, and all those things were really interesting for me for one reason or another. But where I find myself now is I think I wouldn't have been able to do that without having tried out all those things. So.